Good day to all of you. Thank you for being here on the webinar today. You'll learn a lot of tips and tricks from Thalia about tempering, which is the most difficult part in the final steps because you make good chocolate, but if the presentation is not good, that throws off people. So thank you for joining this. So we just want to give a brief introduction about CocoaTown. Will not take more than 5 minutes. So, CocoaTown, we started the parent company called InnoConcept in 1992. Originally, we started trading the specialty kitchen appliances, but in 2000, but still we wanted to be unique. So we had a vision. We had the first company to sell Indian grinders on the website, and then we focused primarily on South Indian market to make South Indian food. But when the recession hit, we wanted to change because we didn't want to focus on only one narrow segment. So we looked at different options where our machines are being used, and we found out that a lot of people are using it for making chocolate, but they had to be MacGyvers. So we said, okay, we will make the machines so you can be the artist and the scientist to make the chocolates, and you don't have to be an engineer or the handyman to fix the machines. So when we started the CocoaTown, there were three areas that we were focusing on the sustainability. One is the sustainability of the environment. We wanted to make sure the machines stay longer. We believe in reduce, reuse, recycle. So we made the machines with the high quality stainless steel as much as possible. And those machines people bought in 2005, 2006, they're still in use. And then customers business, because we are interested in making sure our customers also thrive. That's why, that's one of our goals from the beginning. So we are not in the business of just selling the machines, but we are in the business of creating and empowering entrepreneurs. We call them as Chocopreneurs because they are in the entrepreneurs in the chocolate business around the world. And then the agriculture, because when we entered the market, in 2006, 2007, we found out a lot of the cocoa farmers were in their 60s and 70s, and the next generation didn't want to get involved. We wanted to change that. We wanted to show the cocoa farmers that they have a way to increase their income from the cocoa beans by making it as a finished product, and they can sell in the higher value chain, and they can move up and the younger generation will get involved. And now we see a lot of younger generation getting involved in the cocoa farming and making chocolate, and with the result it making the whole world eat better chocolate without eating the junk chocolate. So it's making a healthy chocolate. Um, so the cocoa, that's all.
I'm pushing the button, but it's not moving.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we want to make sure we just have a small slide that we can share it later. We just show that over the years how we have grown from just selling the melanges in the beginning, but we have the complete line of machines and in four different levels that suits your budget and your requirements. And now we can also coming up with new products based on your feedback. And all our products, we also have the patents on some of them, patents applied for a few of them. And then in 2020, when the pandemic hit, we had to pivot again. Now we started focusing more on the webinars instead of the bean to bar in-person workshops that we used to have from 2014 to 2019. But we had to change. But one good thing is with the webinars, people from a lot of different countries can join at the same time. They can learn in the same time, regardless where they are. They don't have to travel. They don't have to spend money. They just have to switch on their computer or phone and watch it and learn. So thank you. And this would not have happened without the audience or people like Talia, who are donating their valuable time and expertise to educate us. So thank you all for your time today. And we always finish with Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, that translates to the whole world, everybody in the whole universe be happy and free, and may thoughts, words, and actions of my own life contribute in some way to that happiness and to that freedom for all. Thank you, and you can contact us through email, phone number, everything that you already know. So right now, I will turn it on to Teresa.
Thank you, Mrs. Balu. What I like to do is just a little quick conversation with Thalia to get to know her a little bit, ask her a question, just so we can get to know you a little bit. So first, Thalia, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're in California, so you're up early. Thalia, I like to find out when I meet, I say rock stars in the chocolate industry, uh, what moment or what ignited your passion for chocolate? Can you share with us a little bit about that?
I've been looking forward to that kind of question. So it goes back to when I was very young, probably one of my youngest memories. I was certainly aware that my mom was baking chocolate chip cookies, and it never occurred to me that the chocolate was an ingredient until this day. I was probably about 3 years old, and I had been out swimming, and my dad stood me in the sun. And in order to warm me up, my dad grabbed a little handful of chocolate chips and he put them in my hand, and he put one into my mouth so that I had full permission to go ahead and eat a chocolate chip. And I was stunned at what I experienced. And from that moment, I noticed that this chocolate stuff could be transformed. I made the connection, it could be transformed into cookies, and it just made me extremely curious about what else could it be transformed into, because the excitement of the flavor was forever embedded in my brain. So with that moment of love and sunshine and swimming and everything I enjoyed all wrapped up into one. Glad you asked, Teresa. And I've got a little question for you, Teresa. Just wondering, when I meet people and we're talking about chocolate, I like to ask them, where do they hoard their chocolate? Is there some place they hide it? Because some consumers have this tendency to kind of ritualize it. What's your story?
You have to have me telling my secrets. Yes, I do. I love bean to bar chocolate. I have the distinct honor of having Mrs. Balu, who travels around the world and brings back chocolate for me. And so I have it all, about 40 plus bars at the moment, in a basket on the highest shelf in the kitchen, where, it's out of sight, out of mind for anyone else in the home. And I periodically bring it down and lay them all out and look at how beautiful they are, and look at the areas that they're from. And I love it. And yes, I hoard it. My mom will say, oh yeah, she loves chocolate, but we don't ever get to taste it. And if they do, it's a little piece. You get this isn't like yum yum, eat it all up chocolate. This is, you get a little piece, and it's almost like I call it a flavor meditation. You close your eyes and get transported to wherever that bar comes from.
Very nice. Thanks for that detail. And I want to say also to Andal, it's an honor to be part of your program. And I've very much enjoyed the contributions from everybody in the chocolate community. And it's really impressive how this idea of gathering the user group has turned into such an impressive list of, global and really truly global participants. So wonderful. Thank you. Thanks. It's an honor. So should we start in, or where do we go now?
Yeah, with that, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I'm going to do my screen share, and I'm very excited to see some familiar names in the crowd today, and we hope that we'll be bombarded with questions and answers. And here we go. So my screen is hopefully now sharing. And we are talking today about tips and techniques to fix tempering troubles. I have a role at Guittard Chocolate now that is called technical service. that's like answering anybody's questions. I'm kind of a resource person now. I was doing research and new products for over 40 years in chocolate, and now I'm in this more sort of advisory role, and it's a lot of fun. And I want to say thank you to CocoaTown for your Chocopreneurs program. Very, very wonderful for the whole chocolate community. The outline, a reason for our tempering. That's the main reason we want to kind of get a little slideshow out of the way, is to lay a groundwork, lay a structure, and have everybody sort of line up around some of the basics of chocolate. So we'll talk about the reasons that we temper. We'll talk a little bit about the chemistry of temper. And then the quality of temper is the big point in our conversation. There's some terms we call over temper, under temper, good temper. I might add, if it's not good temper, it's bad temper. But we learn to judge the quality so that we can take action to correct it. And that's what we're talking about. So what you see in the photo is a well-tempered chocolate bar, shiny, and you could almost hear it when it snaps. And we're, in general, if we want to just anthropomorphize this, if we want to think about chocolate as a person, we'll be talking about, is the chocolate happy? Our focus is going to be on the chocolate. So much of what we do in our world with chocolate, we're sort of thinking of ourselves. We're thinking, did I do the right thing? Have I roasted it long enough? Have I done the grinding properly? And when it comes to tempering, we're going to think about, is the chocolate happy? Have we done what the chocolate needs? Have we satisfied the chocolate's needs? The reason we temper mostly is for the sensory appeal. The consumers will judge the safety and quality of our product. Quite often we get questions, there's this white stuff on my product, is it safe to eat? So that's number one, safety. We don't want anybody to be afraid of our chocolate, that it might make them sick. And I want to dismiss that right away. The bloom is not something that causes illness. The quality, however, is something that we get to judge as the consumer. Visually, we taste with our eyes. It's a saying. Once we see something, our brain is stimulated. We are wondering what that experience will be like. And that's the point at which we make these judgments. Auditory, our hearing. Do we hear it crack or break? Even if we're not breaking the chocolate in our hands, we hear the sound in our mouth when we bite into it or we make our chewing motions. Is it wholesome and fresh? If it doesn't have the proper auditory input, then we question it. Tactile, is it smooth on the palate? Is it uniform in the melting? So tactile, not only touching with our hands and holding it, but in our mouth. Our mouth has these same sensory feelings. And is it smooth? And also, of course, flavor. Good tempering leads to consistent flavor release, as opposed to a more rugged or interrupted type of flavor tasting process. So in this photo, we see what looks like algae or something we see bayside here. It's something we might see in the shallows of a lake. But this is not a microorganism. This is the cocoa butter. And if we allow cocoa butter or chocolate to cool by itself, it will crystallize. So if we have melted chocolate and we just leave it alone, we walk away from it, it will solidify at room temperature, 70 degrees or 21. And we will see this display of visual chocolate or cocoa butter crystals. So the reason we temper for manufacturing purposes is to create a uniform rheology or flow, yield value, coverage, decoration, viscosity. There are many, many words for it. Lots of us just abbreviate it to say, is it too thick or too thin? We want it to function in the liquid state the way we need it to manufacture. We want it to set quickly. We want rapid production. We want it to shrink or contract when it sets to release from the mold. And we want it to be strong. That's called tensile strength. That's a physics term. And we want it to withstand the handling and the packaging and, of course, the eating and the consumer experience. So bad or poor or inadequate temper quality. These are some issues that are generated in manufacturing if we don't have good temper. Thick or thin flow, again, viscosity, sets slowly, it sticks to the mold, or in this case, you see wafers would stick to the belt. There's no snap, it just bends when you try to break it, and it will look white or scuffed later on. So this is these are some things we find unpleasant, of course. So what is going on in the chocolate? The cocoa butter is a natural part of chocolate. In this photo, I've shown you the cocoa butter separation of some stored chocolate liquor. What I mean is that I took some liquid ground up cocoa mass, chocolate liquor, and I set it in an oven of, let's see, I'm trying to convert here on the side. So anyway, I set it in a 50-degree or 122-degree oven, and I allowed it to rest there for about a week. And the cocoa butter started separating and the material was sedimenting. And you've probably seen this, the solids float to the bottom and the cocoa butter or the oil, the less dense portion, rises to the top. And this is what it did. And I let it set at room temperature. And then these spheres that are the really individual cocoa butter crystals started to form. And that's what the round things are. Each of those, if you excise them or dig them out, is an individual cocoa butter crystal. So what's going on is in tempering, the cocoa butter will change of state from liquid to solid. To drill down, it's the triacyl glycerides, the tags, also known as triglyceride crystallization. The tempering overcomes a property of cocoa butter that we call polymorphism. Don't worry about remembering all these things, but just to give you a brush of this, if it's unfamiliar, and we'll look at it in different ways just in a couple minutes. Polymorphism is managing the energy states. So the cocoa butter, if I liquefy chocolate and I freeze it in the freezer, it will solidify. And when it does, it will assume a crystal form that's comfortable for the cocoa butter, if you will, the proper energy state at the frozen temperature. I bring it out of the freezer and then it rearranges. It will take on a different form at room temperature. Eventually it'll recrystallize. Quite often that's when we see bloom, when it crystallizes on its own. So these polymorphs are different energy states of the cocoa butter. Pre-crystallization, the next bullet point, is how we form seed crystals to catalyze the process, to speed it up from taking days to minutes. So instead of allowing the cocoa butter to slowly turn from liquid to solid at its own pace, we make that happen quickly by doing the tempering, and chemically known as pre-crystallization. And what we want to do during processing is achieve a steady state so that we can run this type of an operation for as long as we need to make our production. Here's some photos. We have on the left the cocoa butter at 120, again about 50 degrees Celsius, liquid onto a marble slab. I used a utensil to manipulate the chocolate and spread it across the marble And then I gathered it up and then I spread it out again and gathered it up and spread it out again. You've probably seen this on YouTube, if not done it yourself many times. It's a form of tabling. And the cocoa butter all by itself with no brown stuff, none of the cocoa mass material, no sugar. It's just what the cocoa butter is doing. And it will form a mush. I gathered up that mush and introduced it back into a beaker or glass vessel of warm liquid cocoa butter. There's a haze present in the center, almost like a cloud that formed within that liquid cocoa butter. The mass entirely was above the melting, was below the melting point of the cocoa butter, which again, if anybody cares to help me convert, is around 32 Celsius. No, it's more like 34. Forgive me. Yeah, 34 Celsius is around the melting point of the cocoa butter. So about 93, 94 degrees is my liquid cocoa butter temperature here. So this is what our pre-crystallization is. We're forcing some of the cocoa butter to become solidified and some of it to be liquid and to have it be just under the melting point of the cocoa butter. Again, a few more iterations of this photo, just hoping that you will see this cloud that I see in here. And it's the way the cocoa butter experiences this cloud. I guess it makes the whole picture cloudy. But anyway, from the cocoa butter point of view, we've got a little bit of solids floating around in the liquid cocoa butter. And anybody who wants to see the chemistry of it, I've done my own little toy models on the left of triglyceride molecule. You can look up triglyceride molecules all day long on scholarly articles online and read this in many of the fine textbooks about fats and oils and cocoa butter. And then in the middle, we have, again, the chemistry diagram or a shortcut sort of illustration of it. We can imagine that when we're tempering, these little molecules are floating around randomly. And then as they begin to crystallize, you'll see the red pair forming. That's what we're trying to do when we temper the chocolate. We're trying to make a few of these come together. And then when it sets, they set up like a chain reaction around that little nucleus that formed, that little core that formed. And then we get our solid chocolate. So we're trying to encourage the cocoa butter molecules to organize. Here is another depiction. These are some more toys that I use to talk about chocolate. Anybody who's seen me live in person knows how much I enjoy playing with my blocks. And here's a little picture of them sitting on the countertop, disorganized, floating around. Pretend every one of those pieces of colored plastic is a cocoa butter molecule. They can arrange themselves in many shapes. I can put these little molecule models together in various states of stability. And again, you don't have to remember this, but if you've seen it once, it's going to help you visualize what your hands are doing when you're doing your tempering. The most stable state is the one that's the hardest to knock over. If you're a little kid and you're playing with these and you want to make the biggest, tallest structure that you can, you're going to want it to be stable. So many of us try all these different forms before we get to the stable one, which is in the center. When we go through cooling, crystal growth, and setting up, we see a progression of just a couple molecules getting together. That's our initial temper that we do. We just force a few molecules to associate, and then we grow them when we start to cool the chocolate. And eventually we form the structure. And when we talk about defects, if we start cooling the chocolate too much when we've already created the little bit of seed temper, we will get it to be too thick. This is a common problem. We'll talk about that. So we have Now the melting stage goes back the other way. We start up at the top on the left with the fully crystallized, and then we warm it up, and the molecules start to come apart from each other. And that's why we go from solid to liquid. And this also shows the temperature at which cocoa butter will melt. I just want to acquaint you with the fact that there are these scientific measures of how you can study this and give you some visual cues to remember or know that you can go look these up for further study. When we're generating our pre-crystallization, we say that we heat up and melt to a high temperature, then we bring it down to a low temperature, 80 degrees on this slide, and then rewarm it up to 90. So again, we drop way down below the melting point briefly to force that crystallization. So then we have a few methods. Seeding is mostly what we're talking about for this user group, because we are faced with liquid chocolate that tastes delicious and it's warm and wonderful, but we have to cool it down in order to get it to our consumers. Generally, we don't have a pre-crystallized mass to work with to introduce into the warm chocolate. But what we do in our seeding method is we generate pre-crystallization using temperature control, agitation, and shearing to generate these precious little nuclei or seed crystals. The most common tempering methods are variations of these two principles, either adding in solids or generating those solids. The point being that we want to develop the right number and type and size. Here's another look at the different forms. Again, just so you've seen it and we move on, is you'll hear about form 5 being favorable. You'll also hear the term beta. It comes from this chart. This is where we all go when we think about what are the different crystal forms of cocoa butter. And we want to select that form 5 when we have our nice finished chocolate. A few words about the quality: good temper, over temper, under temper. Good quality crystals are the proper size, type, and concentration. It results in shiny, good snap, and good shrinkage or contraction or release from the belt or the mold. If we have over temper, we have too many crystals, they're too large, or they're mixed polymorphs, or they're, as I said, too many of them. Or the symptoms are that we would have too thick of chocolate, which results in maybe overweight or very difficult to use product. We have grayish appearance and some sticking of the product. It doesn't contract properly. If we have under temper, this is where we get these really large crystals to grow, and they are visible and they're white all over. There may be mixed polymorphs. We could have too few. Under temper really indicates there's not enough pre-crystallization. And the symptoms are multiple, not only the bad appearance, but also sticking, no contraction, dull, thin. If you're trying to make a dipped piece, it's going to be underweight. So anyway, that's the goal of the tempering process is to get this right. We talked about some methods. Let me just look here to see, I think we're just about done. How to manage the temper. We pay attention to the speed of agitation. This is something we'll talk more about in our troubleshooting when we turn this over to our participants. The speed of agitation, the residence time on the reheat cycle, the method of tempering. Is it something about the machine design? Is it, if it's by hand, is it something about the mush or the tabling? And then do we, there's a traditional method of managing the temper of excuse me, I'll pass that one, or adding the seed. So we have different mechanisms that we can use for tempering. Just to mention, I talked to Andal a minute ago about this. She brought to my attention that there are many machines worldwide that are available, and no particular brand really stands out. There are small mechanisms, there are large mechanisms, but in general, in order to assure that we're not having problems, or what to do when we are having problems, we want to make sure that we don't have the unwanted polymorphs in our pure pre-crystallization. We don't want too many pre-crystallized crystals in there. We don't want too many solids, or we don't want too few. And we don't want them to be of mixed crystal size. So this is kind of a key thing right here that I go back to when we're troubleshooting. We're just going to sort of park it right here. We can always come back. I've got way too much content in my slides after this, but I can always come back to this to give you a few. I'll be referring to the slides if we need to do some deep dives. So with that, we promised a brief-ish presentation. And this is the cross-section of a well-tempered bar. Being able to get the chocolate to fill into these fine ridges is also very prized. So back to the big group here.